Okay, we're going to get started. We only have an hour together this afternoon, so I want to make sure that we're able to use every bit of that time to get through some of the questions and give more information to all of you. Again, hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Chris Kandus-Fisher, and I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, Diversity, and Inclusion. And I'm also a member of the Berklee COVID-19 Core Response Team. Today, I have two colleagues with me to assist in explaining how we're preparing for faculty, staff, and students to return to the physical campus. So I'm going to allow Eileen and Maureen to take a few minutes and introduce themselves before we get started. So Eileen, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this hour. My name is Eileen Alvidi. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources, and I'm also a member of the COVID Core Response Team.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Maureen Hickey. I'm Vice President for Real Estate. I am also a member of the Core Response Team, the COVID Core Response Team.
Great. And many of you may still have not met Maureen. She's still new to our community, but we're delighted to have her with us. She's been an extreme asset to all of our work. As you can imagine, before we dive in here, being back on campus is going to look and feel different, and the health and safety of all Berklee community members remain our top priority over the next month and a half as we begin to welcome people back to the physical campus. I wanted to share that we'll be sharing detailed information on important health and safety protocols for the spring semester, including physical campus changes and expectations that all of our community members will need to follow. This information will be shared in video format, so hopefully all of you got a chance to review the video that was sent out about the Berklee Social Compact and some of the other protocols that are going to be in place that we're going to review today. Like the one that you saw earlier this week, there'll be more and more of those coming up on various topics, and we'll share that information in this webinar. Each of those videos will then be followed up with a webinar and an open session like this, where we will further address submissions of questions that were given to us. And other members of the community will be brought in, key members of the Berklee community, and even our clinical partners at Tufts Medical Center will be part of these conversations. Each video and then subsequent follow-up webinar will be focused on a particular topic, so we can provide as much detail on the various steps we're taking to provide a safe and hopefully healthy campus community. We'll share the dates and times at the end of this webinar so everyone can plan accordingly. For today's webinar, though, just to focus the conversation, we will provide an overview of the Berklee Social Compact, discuss compliance, and ongoing education. So without further ado, let's dive right in and get started. So before we dive into explaining a little bit more and answering some of the questions, I do want to provide some context about what the Berklee Social Compact is. The Berklee Social Compact is a community agreement. This is our agreement where it explains several key items for faculty, staff, and students, and even our contract vendors who will be on campus in the spring. These are shared commitments and expectations that we're making to each other to keep the campus community safe. All community members who are going to be on the physical campus will be expected to adhere to these expectations. We're going to go through them in detail and provide some additional information on each of them through questions that were pre-submitted. So the first part of the social compact talks about social distancing. And if you watch the video, social distancing is also called physical distancing, which means keeping a safe space between yourself and other people who are not part of your household. To practice social or physical distancing, we're asking people to stay at least 6 feet apart from other people who are not part of their household, both indoor and outdoor spaces. So to go a little bit deeper on the social distancing aspect of the compact, Maureen, I have a question for you that I think the group would really benefit from hearing from you on is, how are we assisting the campus community on practicing social distancing inside buildings, classrooms, and our rehearsal rooms? Can you share some of the work that has been done or will be done to the physical campus to support these guidelines?
Absolutely, Chris. So the real estate and physical plant team have been spending an enormous amount of time thinking about all of the spaces that Chris just mentioned within our campus. there will be in, say, a classroom, in all instructional spaces, the capacity of those rooms has been adjusted to account for a minimum of 6 feet distance between individuals. Further, in each of those classrooms, we are going in and we're marking tape on the floor where a chair should be, so that if the chairs get moved around during activities, we know we can put the chairs back after cleaning and you can come into class and have 6 feet minimum between individuals. I say minimum because for some activities, for example, activities that might have singing or vocalists, we have a minimum distance of 15 feet between the singer and any other individual in the room. In each room, we will have a new adjusted maximum capacity posted in yellow, the front of the classroom, or rehearsal room, ensemble room, or practice rooms. It's really important that all members of the community respect that adjusted maximum capacity that will allow for the appropriate physical distancing. Other things that we have done is thinking about the circulation through buildings. So in our corridors, stairways, and elevators, we are trying to create space by directing traffic in one direction to the greatest degree possible. Further staggering, we're working with our colleagues in academic scheduling to stagger class start and end times so that all courses are not leaving at one time. And then finally, it's really important to think about that there are some corridor and stairwell spaces on the Berklee campus that is narrow and won't allow 6 feet at all points in time. We have worked closely with our partners at Tufts Medical to confirm that the idea of close contact is being within 6 feet of an individual for 15 minutes or more. So if you are passing within 3 feet in the hallway, it won't be considered a close contact, although we do ask that you try to maintain that 6 foot distance as much as possible. Oh, and finally, we have worked with partners in the community to lease space so that we can spread out when it comes to the January start. More on what those specifics are to come in the near future, but we will have some space to spread out.
Great, thanks, Maureen. And in one of our follow-up videos and webinars later in the coming weeks, we'll be able to give you a glimpse of what the physical campus looks like. So all the things that Maureen just mentioned, the signage, the different spacing, and the arrangements that we're doing across campus, you'll have a visual of that through a video that we're filming, so you can see it in person before your arrival back to campus. Eileen, I have a question for you that came in around, this is really around faculty, staff, and students. How will meetings take place, in the spring? Will we still be meeting in person? Should we be having business meetings in person? What's the approach and how should we plan for that going into the spring?
Thank you, Chris. That's a great question. Excuse me. So any decision for faculty, staff, or students to hold a meeting on campus, no matter how short a period of time or how small a group of people, should really rely on a risk-based approach. If you are holding a meeting in person, we should be using as large a room as possible, and the number of attendees should be no more than 10 people in any meeting. To ensure that we're keeping safe social distances as Maureen described in those meeting rooms. Stagger arrival and stagger departure of meeting times will be important. Designated seats in those meetings will be important. And all attendees must be at least 6 feet apart. Any meeting should also include video conferencing capabilities for those that prefer to attend via video conferencing. And we would actually encourage video conferencing meetings wherever possible instead of in-person meetings.
Great, thank you, Eileen. So we're going to move on to the next section of the social compact, and it's called Wear a Mask. That's the next section there. So the CDC recommends that people wear masks in public settings. like on public and mass transportation, at events and gatherings, and anywhere there'll be others around that you may come in contact with. What we're encouraging you all to do is to find a mask that is comfortable and fits you properly. So when we say fits you properly, this is what we're recommending. There are certainly other options that also will make you compliant. But the mask should be, if you're going to wear a cloth mask, it should have 2 or more layers of washable, breathable fabric. And let me stress the washable piece of it. Students, faculty, and staff, we encourage you to wash your cloth mask on a regular basis as well. Surgical masks are certainly fall into the compliance aspect as well, if that's what your preference is, but those are just meant to be disposable. So you need to make sure you have plenty on hand if you're going to go down that route. The mask itself, it should cover your nose and mouth and fit snugly against the side of your face and under your chin. So this is not something where we want it only covering your nose and your mouth is exposed. We want it to be something that is snugly around your sides of your face, your chin, your nose, and your mouth. So as you're planning for your return to campus, if you haven't done so already, which I'm sure you have, is continue to test out masks that you feel comfortable wearing for the period of the day. Ones that are washable and breathable, and get those ready now and have a backup supply before you come to campus. So Eileen, the next follow-up question is really towards you and me, I think, that can answer this. And Maureen, you can certainly jump in because you've been part of this as well. Is wearing a mask mandatory at all times on campus?
So I'll start by saying that wearing of masks, we know, is a very powerful and effective tool. And we are going to be requiring this for all of our community members as we work together to minimize the spread of infection. I'm sure you've been, watching the news and reading about studies that demonstrate that wearing masks significantly lowers the risk of the spread of virus. And what we're learning this week is that not only does wearing a mask protect other people, but it also protects the wearer as well. And as Chris mentioned, a clean cloth mask can reduce a wearer's exposure to incoming droplets and can even block tiny, potentially virus-laden particles. So we are asking everyone to wear a mask at all times.
Great. Is there times when a mask is okay not to be worn?
There may be very few instances in which our community members will not be expected to wear a mask. So for example, if you're eating lunch in a space where you're alone and physically distanced from others, that might be an example of a time when you will not have a mask. We are insisting that employees wear protective gear in light of the pandemic, and a mask is one of those things. However, we will consider providing modified or alternative protective gear absent undue hardship if the need arises due to a disability. And those disability accommodation requests can be forwarded to Human Resources for our faculty and staff and to Student Disability Services for students.
And for students, you should be planning as well that a mask is mandatory for you as well. You should have it on at all times, in hallways, common spaces, as you're walking about the campus, going into classrooms, all things Berklee, the mask should be on. To follow up on what Eileen said, there'll be times obviously that when you're eating, just like you are when you go to restaurants and spaces, you can take your mask off to eat, but then you should still be applying all those other health and safety protocols in place. If you're living on campus, once you get into your residence hall room, of course, you can take your mask off in there, but immediately coming back out into any common spaces, including hallways, the mask should be worn at all times.
And I just want to jump in quickly to say that for students, we will be setting up designated places for people to eat safely. So that will sort of be an area where you can take your mask off. Other than that, we're asking that students not eat around campus, but of course, feel free to quickly take their mask off and have some water or other beverage that they may need, but go to one of the designated eating areas for their lunch or snacks.
Great, thanks, Maureen. And for all students on campus, residential and on our commuting students. There will be a follow-up webinar that you'll get an invitation to. It'll focus just on the dining and residential experience. So we'll dig into more detail on that, including the additional spaces that we have identified across campus that Maureen just mentioned outside of 160 the CAF that will be eating spaces for you. So more to come on that. There'll be a webinar that'll be focused specifically on that information. So the next piece that we're going to go to is around washing your hands. So we'd ask that you wash your hands regularly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds, especially after you've been in public places or after blowing your nose, coughing, or sneezing. One of the additional questions that we got on this aspect of the compact is, besides washing our hands, will there be any other sanitation stations around campus? So Maureen, this falls into your world. Would you mind answering that question for us?
Absolutely. So we will have hand sanitizer dispensers all over campus. We have added a large number of wall-mounted hand sanitizers. So when you enter a building, when you're near the elevator, in a hallway that's leading to classrooms, that will be there for you to sanitize. We are using the minimum 60% alcohol hand sanitizer as recommended by the CDC. In addition, we have procured a large number of pump bottles that we will be putting inside the individual classrooms and adjacent to practice and rehearsal rooms. So we feel really confident that there will be opportunities for hand sanitizer throughout campus, and we encourage use of it.
Thank you very much, Maureen. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is we're asking everyone to wipe down and disinfect workspaces after using them. So when you come back to campus, we will ask that you help us by cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched surfaces. These may include things in your room, the classroom, or your apartment. So for example, please clean light switches, countertops, handles, desks, phones, keyboards, instruments, your laptops and computers, toilets, and sinks. So in your room or in your apartments, we'd like you to address those things, but there's also the common workspaces that we're all going to be coming in contact with, that there'll be specific cleaning protocols in place that we're going to ask you to assist us on. So one of the questions that came in is, how will I know what is expected of me for each space on campus in regards to cleaning? Will there be signs and steps to take? So Maureen, I'm going to throw it back to you again, if you could speak to that.
Sure. So as Chris says, it's going to be really important that all members of the Berklee community participate in cleaning. This is going to be in addition to the robust professional custodial services that we have on campus, but we will be making available cleaning wipes in all areas adjacent to instructional space, practice rooms, and rehearsal rooms. And we ask that individuals wipe down before and after use any item that you are using that then will be shared with the future user. So if you go into a general classroom and you sit down in the, you want to wipe off the tab armchair, and that's it. In that room, you don't have to wipe down the light switches. We will be having custodians going around wiping down the high touch shared spaces. But if you go into an individual practice room, we're going to be asking that you wipe down a bit more, because that's a single user space. We will have signage to remind you what to wipe down. But as you approach a practice room, you will take a cleansing wipe that will be available in the hallway. You want to wipe the door handle as you go into that room. You probably want to wipe it when you, the door handle on the inside, the light switch, the chair there, and any shared instrument or equipment, if appropriate. And you as musicians will know the things that are sensitive for, not wanting to get water on. We have some areas with sensitive equipment that we are going to have an alcohol-based sanitizing agent so as to limit the liquid. And then you'll have your practice session, and at the end, you'll take another wipe. You will wipe down everything that you wipe down upon entrance and then safely dispose of that cleansing wipe. This is a way to help make the space ready for the next Berklee user. And as Chris mentioned, we will have signage in each of the practice rooms. We will have signage in the hallway around instructional spaces to remind you.
Great. Maureen, can I just do a follow-up on that? Can you talk a little bit about the additional steps that you and your team are taking for all the common spaces that that we are not going to ask people to be cleaning, but are high-touch areas or areas that we would be going into, including like bathrooms that are public to everyone, and any of the other common spaces that we'll all be kind of engaging in?
Sure, yeah. So we have greatly increased the custodial services, which is provided by our partner Acme. We will be having custodians in the main buildings wiping down those high touch spaces. So the door handles, the elevator buttons, the light switches, other things where there's frequent high touch. We've also procured something called nanoseptic, and that is like a plastic layer with some technology in it that kills bacteria and virus on touch. And it works for 6 months. So we're installing that the end of December so that throughout the spring semester, things like an elevator button will be self-cleaning. And then on top of that, we will be having custodial staff frequently during the day wiping it down.
Great, thank you very much. Eileen, a question that maybe you and I can tackle is asking about, so besides what Maureen just mentioned, what about office spaces and office suites? What will be the responsibility of faculty and staff to do that? And then I see a follow-up question there about what are students going to have to do for their individual rooms. So I can take that one if you want to take the offices.
Okay. My view on this is that a clean workspace is a healthy and a happy workspace. And just like you do at home, we would want you to keep your workspace clean if you're a faculty and a staff member. So just to expand quickly on what Maureen said, sanitizing surfaces and objects that you touch in your workspace when you come into campus, it will be important for you to wipe down. So that includes your desk, countertops, doorknobs, computer keyboards, faucet handles if you're in an area, a shared kitchen, and phones. So we would ask that you use disinfecting wipes on electronic items that you touch often, such as your phones and or computers, and to pay close attention to the directions for using disinfecting wipes. You want to throw away items that you are not using. After you eat your lunch, you want to make sure you dispose of those items and then clean surfaces, put them in the trash immediately after use, and then wash your hands with warm soap and water after emptying waste. So those are just a few examples of how you can keep your workspace clean to limit infection.
Great, thank you. And I would echo everything that Eileen said, but apply that to your residence hall room students. I would actually say this, that you probably should do more than what you've normally done. I remember many times where I've seen some interesting residence hall rooms as we've gone in to assist with students. And I would ask that you do more, that you be prepared to come in with cleaning materials to keep your room as clean as possible on a regular basis, wiping down all of the same surfaces that Eileen mentioned and more. And remember that if you have an internal bathroom, that's something that you should be paying close attention to as well. So being prepared with supplies and a regular cleaning regimen to address all those things in your physical spaces will be equally important. So that's a great question around what we are responsible to do around cleaning surfaces. Maureen, anything else to add on your part?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, great. So let's move to the next section of the compact, is around limiting travel to and from campus. So it's important to keep the entire community safe. We've talked about that earlier, and we're asking that you limit any unnecessary travel. Please keep in mind that travel in and out of Massachusetts also has restrictions by the state, and we need to also follow those guidelines for travel. So we're asking community members to limit anything that's unnecessary. Of course, emergencies will happen, but anything that's unnecessary travel that you have typically done when you've been back in Boston on the physical campus, we're asking you to severely restrict that travel. It'll only keep all of us safe and allow us to fully implement the health and safety protocols that we've put in place to protect all of you. So this next question, Eileen, I think really goes to you and me. But what about, can I plan a short vacation outside of Massachusetts or out of the country after I arrive to Berklee in the spring? Is that recommended?
So I'll start and with a focus on our faculty and staff. And I view that sort of in three components. So first is Berklee sponsored travel. And we all know that all Berklee sponsored work-related travel is suspended throughout the spring semester and until further notice. Next is travel to work from outside of Massachusetts for those faculty and staff who are working on campus that live outside of Massachusetts. So under the current travel rules within Massachusetts, anyone entering Massachusetts from other states must fill out a Massachusetts travel request form or a travel form and quarantine for 2 weeks unless they can produce a negative test result from a COVID test that is administered no more than 72 hours before they arrive in state. And we'll be talking more about our testing protocols for faculty and staff who are on campus, but we are going to be testing regularly, testing weekly for our faculty and staff. So hopefully that will comply and comport with all Massachusetts regulations regarding traveling in from out of state. And then, of course, there is personal travel. So any travel, whether domestic or international, can increase the chances of getting and spreading COVID-19. There are risks associated with travel, which include being potentially stranded, or contracting the disease, or becoming asymptomatic and then spreading it to others. So while we cannot restrict it, we are strongly encouraging you to limit any personal travel, and to be very thoughtful about our social compact and the impact that travel could have on our community.
Great, and thank you, Eileen. That's very helpful. And from a student perspective, some of the things that you all should be thinking about is that do remember that for the spring semester, there will be no spring break. So you should not be planning for a spring trip anywhere. We're asking everyone to stay put. We are starting the academic year a week later to accommodate the elimination of spring break. For all the things that Eileen said, certainly applies to our students as well. Short trips outside of Massachusetts, going to other states, getting on the train and going to New York City and doing all those types of things that you may have done in previous semesters, we're asking you to really consider whether or not that is necessary travel. And it does put the community at risk if people decide to start moving about and traveling. So we're asking you to really honor the unnecessary travel restriction that we're asking for all of you and really severely limit it to only emergencies. If there is a reason where there's an emergency, students, and you need to travel outside, we would like you to make sure that you get in contact with someone by emailing covid19@berklee.edu so we can talk about the steps for your safe return to campus and the testing regimen that needs to take place to make sure you're protected and the community is protected as well. All right, that's kind of a nice segue into reporting. So the last piece of the compact is reporting in a timely manner. So positive diagnosis or potential exposures of COVID-19 within our community, we're asking you to report that information to us. We ask that you be alert of your own health and those that are around you. If you're not well, stay home and call your primary care physician. If you're a faculty or staff member and students, we will offer medical support as well to you by you reaching out to covid19@berklee.edu. So if anyone in the community has a positive case or has a potential exposure, please, we want you to notify us. The covid19@berklee.edu is a great way to start. There are staff members from the core response team that are regularly monitoring that, and we can respond quickly and get you in contact with medical professionals and also talk about what are the immediate next steps that you should take if that ends up happening to you during the spring semester. So one of the questions that came in about reporting is, if I learn that I've tested positive for COVID-19 or learn that someone in the community is COVID-19 positive, do I have to report the name of the individual? Can I keep it confidential and not report? So Eileen, I don't know if you want to start and then I can chime in on that one.
Sure. So Berkeley has an obligation to report to the Department of Public Health and other state and federal agencies positive cases in our community. So we know that this is a sensitive topic, and people's private health protected information is sensitive, and we are going to handle it very sensitively. But yes, if you test positive for COVID-19, or if you are aware that someone else in our community has tested positive, we ask that you please report that to the COVID response team. That is very important for us to keep our community safe and keep our community healthy, because there are a number of actions that we would need to take as a result of that information.
Yes, and I would add that you do need to provide the name. This is not something where you're a confidential resource. If you learn of this, of a positive case or potential exposures, we do need to know the name of the individual so we can begin other critical processes, as Eileen indicated, to make sure the community stays safe. So please report in a timely manner. Give us as much information as you can. We will keep that information private, but also it'll allow us to do what we need to do to safeguard the community about further spread. So please remember, this is everyone's responsibility around reporting potential exposures or potential cases that are popping up in our community. Okay, we're going to move to the next question that we have here is, how will compliance to health and safety expectations be managed for faculty, staff, students, and those vendors that come into campus? So I can start with that one, and then Eileen can speak to the faculty and staff piece. For students, compliance will be strictly enforced. We will go through a progressive disciplinary process, just like we would on any other type of community standards violation. For those who do not comply with the expectations in regards to our health and safety protocols. So the community standards team will work with you directly for anyone who violates the compact or any of the other protocols that we have in place. And depending on the severity of the situation, it could end up meaning that you are suspended from the physical access to campus. And so I'm hoping that we all take this very seriously. I know all of you do, and that will hopefully not have to be the case. But we're prepared to do that if necessary, if there are repeat offenders or people who are blatantly disregarding the health and safety expectations. We want to make sure that the campus is safe. That is our highest priority. And we're asking all of you to help with the compliance aspect of it, hold each other accountable, hold your peers accountable, and report anything that comes in where there is anyone that's violating those. But there is a protocol in place to address any non-compliance. And we're prepared to do that from basic education all the way up to a more severe situation where we have to remove someone from campus. Eileen, do you want to talk about faculty and staff?
Sure, certainly. I just want to add to what Chris said. This topic is an example of the important shared responsibility we have to make sure that we're being respectful of our community members and that we are all doing our part to minimize the risk of infection. So Human Resources has created a guide to address non-compliance with COVID safety protocols for our faculty and staff. And that aligns directly with our corrective action policy, process, and procedures. So any violations among faculty and staff will and can have widespread negative consequences, and we need to understand and address those. So a member of Human Resources will immediately explore, evaluate the facts, and address the issue with a faculty or staff member who is alleged to be in violation, or if a violation occurs. And corrective action will be administered if appropriate, depending on the severity of the violation. It could be anywhere up to a verbal warning, up to and including removal from campus and or involuntary termination. We hope that will not be the case. We are focusing on education as a first step, and we are relying on our community members to understand the importance of this shared responsibility. We are also creating several mechanisms to report. So if a faculty or a staff member is seen in violation, those reports can come directly to Human Resources. They can go directly to the COVID core response team, and they will be triaged as appropriately, or they can be reported anonymously on the Back to Berklee page. We have a web form set up for that. So there will be 3 distinct mechanisms for reporting faculty and or staff violations.
And those mechanisms can also be used for students as well. So if there is a report, any community member can report anyone who's not compliant with the health and safety expectations. And you can do that by either listing your name and providing the information, or the anonymous reporting that Eileen talked about. So you'll see more information in future communications about that, but you can go to our COVID-19 Back to Berklee page, and you'll be able to see that information as it's ready to be rolled out for the spring semester. But again, this is really a shared responsibility. We're counting on all of you to do what you need to do to keep the community safe. It's our shared responsibility, the health and safety of our community. And we do feel confident that you all understand that and will do your part to assist us in making that happen for everyone. So the next question that we have is a little bit about the more ongoing online training and education. And so I'll take a stab at that, and then Maureen and Eileen, if you feel, if there's anything I missed, feel free to jump in. So we're doing, as I said earlier, a series of these video education tools that will be going out now for the next several weeks until our arrival back to campus on various topics of our health and safety protocols and expectations, and how we're going to return back to the physical campus. So you should expect video content on a weekly basis moving forward. Then again, with the webinar follow-up like we're doing now to address some of the questions that were coming in. Also through the webinar, I'm noticing in the Q&A section, there's other questions that are coming in that will be addressed in ongoing weeks. We'll try to pick off some of the ones that apply to this conversation today, but know that we're not forgetting those questions. They will be addressed as we move closer and closer to campus. In addition to the webinars and the video content, all faculty, staff, and students who are returning back to the physical campus will have to go through an online training module prior to their first day of work or learning. So that will be sent out in late December for people to start completing prior to their arrival. It won't be a long training module, but certainly one that pertains and hits all the salient points that we're expecting of the community. Some of the things will be content that we're addressing in these webinars and videos, but we want to make sure we're reinforcing expectations. We're making sure that we're reinforcing that there's a shared understanding of how we need to take care of each other coming into the spring semester. And so the online training module will reinforce all those basic protocols and expectations to make sure that we're all working from the same knowledge on how we're approaching the spring. So we're trying to make sure that we really inundate the community with as much education, information, and understanding so you all feel safe to return, and also to understand what your shared responsibility as a member of the Berklee community. So Eileen, Maureen, did I miss anything you want to add there?
I think you've covered that well, Chris.
Okay, very good. So Eileen, this is a question for you, and you briefly brought this up in your last answer. Can you share a little bit more detail about the resources for faculty and staff regarding the process to come back to campus, and then also those resources for those faculty and staff who may be remaining remote in the spring, and what resources are available to them as we open for the spring hybrid?
Certainly. So Human Resources has prepared a return to campus guide for all of our faculty and staff. It is located on the Back to Berklee website and Keeping Our Community Healthy page as well. And it contains important information related to safety, personal protection. It also has a comprehensive Q&A that may answer additional questions that you have after listening to this webinar and other questions that arise as we move forward. It also contains important information related to your benefits, leave of absences, policies, accommodations, etc. So I would encourage you to read through that carefully. In addition, our benefits team is prepared and ready to answer any questions that you may have, and they're available for individual one-on-one consults with you if you would like to do that. We also have an HR webpage that contains several detailed benefits pages, including important materials and resources for health and wellness for your body and for your mind as we prepare for this change in January. It has information related to Tufts Health Plan if you are a Tufts Health Plan member, and it has additional webinars and resources and reading materials for you as well. It contains detailed information about our employee assistance program and the resources that are available to you through our EAP, such as counselors, social workers, resources, webinars, information related to balancing the challenges of work and family, childcare resources, etc. And then finally, our HR staff members and our HR partners are available to speak with you about any questions that you may have as we get closer to return to campus. Some of our faculty will continue to be working remotely. Some of our staff will be continuing to work remotely throughout the spring semester, and we are prepared to provide additional ongoing support for our remote workers as well. And there is information related to that on our HR pages as well.
Great. Thank you, Arlene. So we're going to try to pick off some of the questions that are here that have been coming in. Maureen, can you talk a little bit about, are there identified spaces where faculty can go to in between classes if they are coming to campus and teaching and then they have like a break? Will they have a space to go to?
The short answer is yes. We will identify spaces for faculty to go to. At this moment in time, I don't have the specifics on that because, as Eileen said, a number of faculty will continue to work remotely, and we are encouraging any faculty who don't need to be on campus to remain teaching from home. But for those faculty members who have multiple classes in a day and need downtime on campus, we are working with each department to identify spaces where faculty can be appropriately distanced during those times, and that information will be provided through chairs.
Great, thank you, Maureen. And by the time we get to the section, the webinar around physical spaces and things like that, I'm sure Maureen will have more detailed information about that in the coming weeks. So stay tuned on that, but we are certainly working on it. Another question that came in is, will Berklee provide reusable masks to all community members? So our plan is right now is that we're asking all of you to begin to get your PPE together, your personal protective pieces, and start having a readily supply of that available. We will have things on campus. There'll be times when a mask may break or someone may run out of a building and forget it. So of course we are going to have things ready to go, but we are not providing upon arrival masks for everyone, but there will be those available if needed in those extreme circumstances. Maureen, did I miss anything there? I know you've been working closely on that as well.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's, bring your own mask policy. We'll have masks available, disposable masks available in an emergency situation. And I believe that the bookstore will also be carrying masks, reusable masks.
That is correct. Eileen, a quick question for you. What about private offices? So if you have a private office and the door is closed, can you take your mask off?
I would say cautiously, yes. But if there are other staff or faculty members or students in and out of that room, you will need to keep your mask on.
Great. What about wearing masks in the dorms? That was a question that came in. Yes. So the only time students should take off their masks is when they are in their personal room. They can do that. But in hallways, throughout the residence halls, going up in the elevator, going up the stairs, any common spaces, a mask should be worn. Let's see here. Some of these things we'll address a little bit later. Maureen, I'm not sure if you can speak to this or not. I know we've been both having some deep conversations about the various ways we clean the shared instruments like a piano. So how do we go about making sure like a shared instrument in a practice room like a piano will be cleaned, the piano keys specifically?
So you're absolutely right that we have been having a lot of conversations about it. The current thinking is that the cleaning wipes, the sanitizing wipes that we will be making available are safe for the piano keys. We confirmed that there's very little, if any, ivory keys left on campus, and that those would be the ones that we would be most concerned about using the sanitizing wipes on. But I just want to put an asterisk on my comment to say we are doing further investigation with the piano department and some of our academic support colleagues, just to make sure that the frequency of wiping down these keys won't have any long-term impacts. And so this is, again, something that will be clearly signed in the practice rooms and the classrooms, but also I do hope to have a very clear statement by the webinar on facilities.
Well, I have you, Maureen, one more question. When we're asked to clean the common spaces or surfaces, besides the cleaning materials that you mentioned, will there be gloves available for those that have to clean those common spaces?
So yes, we will be providing gloves and making the gloves available around campus. I will say that the frequency of hand sanitizer as well as the cleansing wipes, you'll see more of that around campus, but you will be able to access gloves. This is another thing that we spent a lot of time thinking about and having discussions and looking at the research. We want to make sure that people don't feel like they should be wearing gloves for the activity that they're undertaking, whether they're working in a lab or a classroom, because the research says that having gloves on can actually give a false sense of security that you're not spreading potential germs around. But we understand that many people feel more comfortable having a glove on to do the cleaning. And so they will be available for that. We just ask that everybody think carefully about disposing of those gloves immediately and appropriately.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to try to take maybe two more from the chat here, and then we want to give you some closing information. All of the questions in here, don't worry if we didn't get to answer them. We are collecting all of these. These are all things that we will try to address in future webinars or communications. Maureen, I'm sorry, just to ask you one more question, because I know that you know all of this very well. Can you briefly speak about this? I know we're going to dig into this more detailed in the physical spaces webinar later, but can you address that a little bit about the air circulation and some of the work that we've been doing in those buildings? Because I know you've done a tremendous amount of work on that already.
Yes. So the physical plant team, as well as partners who are engineering consultants, we have been looking into the ventilation of all of the Berklee buildings. For the most part, we have great mechanical ventilation systems. We have replaced the air filters over the summer with the MERV 13, which is the highest recommended filter for these systems. There are some areas on campus that don't have mechanical circulation, so we are providing additional HEPA filters and in some cases portable ventilation. There's a third category of space on campus for a small amount of spaces that does not have mechanical ventilation and they don't have appropriate passive ventilation, which would be opening windows. Those spaces we're taking offline for the spring semester because we feel like they cannot meet the standard for ventilation to reduce COVID risk. And as Chris said, at a future webinar, we can get into more detail because my team and I have thought a lot about this, and I feel confident that the spaces where coursework and living will be taking place, the air is safe and the ventilation is adequate.
Great, thanks, Maureen. There's a bunch of questions in here around testing. That is our next communication and webinar, but I want to briefly reassure everyone that we have developed a what I would say a very robust testing protocol and regimen in partnership with the Tufts medical clinicians. And so they will actually be the ones running our on-campus testing facility. So all tests will be covered by Berklee if you go to the testing center on the Berklee campus. That'll be for faculty, staff, and students. If you choose to be tested elsewhere, we'll explain how that works when we dive into that webinar. But all testing will be available on campus, and it will all be run through our Tufts Medical Center team that will be on site to conduct all of that. And then a quick question in here, will outside guests be allowed to come to campus? The answer is no. We are restricting access of outside guests coming into campus. It'll only be those faculty, staff, students, and our contract vendors that we have partnerships with. But all of those folks are required to follow our testing guidelines and protocols that we've put in place. So we're all following the same regimen on that, and more to come on testing. So just for the sake of time, like I said, this has been really helpful. I love all the questions coming in. Your questions are things that we have been working on for months now to prepare for the opening of the spring. And we will make sure we capture all these and discuss them in the coming weeks as we gather. I would encourage you to stay with us on this conversation. This is just the beginning of us giving you information on how we're going to approach the return to campus. So in closing, in our final minutes here, I just wanted to share some final information. So while we're out of time right now for today's webinar, I did first want to thank my wonderful panelists here with me, Eileen Alvidi and Maureen Hickey. Thank you again, Eileen and Maureen, for joining me today for this discussion. And I hope for all of you, this provided more information to you regarding the opening of the physical campus and the expectations for your return. As I've been mentioning throughout this webinar, there are several more webinars and video conversations that are scheduled for the coming weeks. I did want to give you a couple of the dates now. So if you have a pen or pencil or you have your phone ready to type in these dates, the dates and times that we have scheduled already. The next one will happen on November 18th, where we'll be diving into our testing protocols. So a little more deeper dive into that. Prior to the 18th, you should expect a video message that will also lay out the basics of our testing. So we'll have the basic information sent to you in video content, and then a follow-up webinar that will be scheduled on the 18th. That webinar will happen again at the same time, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time. December 2nd, we are going to really talk about isolation and quarantine and the steps that we're taking to do that, and the protocols and expectations around isolation and quarantine. That'll be December 2nd, again from 12 to 1. And then the webinar we've been mentioning a few times here, the campus facilities and our deep dive into cleaning protocols that Maureen's been answering at a high level today, will be on December 10th from 12 noon to 1 p.m. As I said, all of those have been scheduled. There are a few more that we are going to be working on. There'll be an additional webinar that'll be coming out that will really be focused on our residential students. So residential students and families, I would encourage you to attend the webinar discussion around the campus move-in process and how that will work so you can plan accordingly. The date is being solidified and will be sent out to all residential students as well. There also will be a webinar for those faculty members on the call where we'll really focus on the faculty experience. So a webinar for the faculty, or on the faculty for the faculty. So more to come on both of those. If you're a parent or family member wondering how you can get access to those video content, the new student and family programs team will be sending out the videos to all of you through that listserv and through the newsletter. So be on the lookout to look at those. All of you are automatically enrolled as a parent and family member into the new student and family programs site if you are a family of a student at Berklee. So you're automatically enrolled there. If for some reason you do not get that information, you can email NSFP. So N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, F as in Frank, P as in Paul at berklee.edu. So again, I really wanted to thank all of you for joining us. This is a wonderful response to this. It's important information for all of you to have as we approach the start of the spring semester. Please, again, stay with us, continue to RSVP for future webinars and information as we plan and explain to you how we're going to successfully and safely open the Berklee community. So thank you, stay well, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.